Oh.
Okay, so welcome to the College of Engineering. You know you're in trouble when one of the deans pulls out a piece of paper and wants to start speaking. So we're very pleased to welcome Steve Wozniak, who's also known as the Wizard of Woz, who is the consummate engineer. He was born in 1950 in San Jose, California, and he, among his peers, made San Jose into the prototype of a center of global innovation, Silicon Valley as we know it today. He's chiefly responsible for one of the most important innovations of the past century. I should say the past millennium, and that is the personal computer, bringing computers out to the masses. Before this time, at MSU, if you were lucky enough to have an account, you'd have a stack of cards this thick that you drew a little line across, just in case you tripped and dropped them, and you would cue them up to this magic computer, and hopefully the answer would come out at some point. What you made available is computing to many, many people. In 1985, you left full-time employment with Apple and began a career devoting time to philanthropy and encouraging students to learn. Steve, one example of the technological outreach that you inspired is going on here at Michigan State University. In a few weeks, some students from our senior class will travel to Tanzania to install the latest version of an MSU-designed computer kiosk so that kids in a village far from here have all the advantages of the access to information that your invention has given to all of us. Steve received the National Medal of Technology from President Reagan in 1985, was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame in 2000, and received the Heights Award for Technology in 2001. He graduated from the University of California at Berkeley in 1986 under the pseudonym Rocky Raccoon Clark in both computer science and electrical engineering. So anyone out here who says one major is too tough, here's an example of where we can go farther. He has many public appearances, including The Big Bang Theory and Dancing with the Stars, and word is that he danced just exactly the way we would expect an engineer to dance. I won't say when he left that show. Steve, on behalf of the faculty, staff, and most importantly, the students of the College of Engineering, welcome to the Spartan family.
Thank you very much for that warm reception. I was supposed to have a question-answer Q&A talk with students, but I'm going to open it with a few comments of my own. When we started Apple Computer, Steve Jobs and I, we were in our young 20s. We had no business experience. We had no business courses in college. We had no money. We had no savings accounts. We had no friends or family that could loan us any money to start a company. We had the first year that we ran in a garage, the way we did it was we got credit, 30 days credit for the parts for our computers. We built them in 10 days and sold them for cash. And that was how we ran it. Basically, the lesson I learned from that was whatever little tiny amount of money, of resources you have, do what you can positively with that much, and it will get you to the next step. It will always come along. I really want to believe that I get a lot of these acknowledgments and awards and honorary degrees in life because I'm a nice guy, but probably more comes from Apple Computer. Yes, when I was in school, I was one of those smart guys getting the math awards at all my schools and all that, and doing electronics and building all these gadgets, huge gadgets. Had a ham radio set I built when I was 10 years old and had a license. And then I fell in love with this computer technology in 5th grade, and I said, wait a minute, ones and zeros. Nobody would come across a magazine that taught you binary. I discovered a journal by accident in the hall closet, and I looked at it, ones and zeros. This stuff is easy to learn. Look how they add. Look at these things called logic gates, and or. I said, oh my gosh, I can understand this. A 5th grader can understand it. You don't need high-level math. You don't need trigonometry and calculus and algebra and anything. As a matter of fact, every single thing that is in a computer today, the iPhone in your hands, every single digital part of it, a 5th grader can totally understand. understand and figure out on their own, if that was the direction that they took. So I just fell in love. I said, this is my thing in life. No other friends know about this stuff. No teachers teach it. There are no books in school. I'm just going to find everything I can in my life and study this one subject and learn it. I didn't think there were ever jobs in computers. I thought they were in some strange places called research. I didn't know what that was, what that meant. So by high school, I started playing tricks with paper, pencil and paper. How do you design a computer out of these little logic gates that I built a lot of real big, real huge, hundreds of transistors to play tic-tac-toe or add numbers. I built those in science fair projects. How do you take these little gates that are going to be in chips soon? How do you combine them to make this computer that I had a manual for? And I worked and worked and worked, and it took a lot of tries and didn't get very far. And then some chip manuals came out from my dad, and I looked at them, and I worked at it, and I was able to design a whole computer. And then I started every weekend in my room, every free weekend. I would close my door. No parents, nobody around me, white tabletop, and I would just start looking at the design of a new computer, a manual. I started getting manuals from all the computers being made in that day. I'd go down to, where do you get a computer manual? There's no stores. I'm too shy to write to a company. I would go to Stanford Lynn Accelerator Center, the top physics research place in the world back then. Drive down with a friend. We figured they have a library. They must have computer books, manuals. And I drive in there and drive past the guard. I found the main building, tried a door, it was locked. Tried another door, it was locked. Tried another door, it was open. I found every single Sunday I ever went down to Stanford Lynn Accelerator Center, there was an open door. Where real smart people work, they tend to leave things unlocked. That's what I learned. I'd get in, and I would get into computer magazines. I'd order manuals for computers. Every computer of those days, mini computers mostly, from Hewlett-Packard, from Varian, from Digital Equipment Corporation, from Data General. All these companies were putting out mini computers. And I got to where I could design a mini computer, any new mini computer, in 1 to 2 days. I worked and worked. I had all these techniques in my head that were just automatic and saving parts. I made a game. How can you save parts? Engineering is about efficiency, right? Output divided by input. I want to get the most out for the least in. And I want to use the fewest parts, the lowest cost. And then I determined that if you're using a chip with a lot of pins, and a chip with fewer pins is more reliable, and it's really a simpler overall configuration. And I made little games with myself, and I got better and better and better. And I never thought I'd have a job designing computers. By the time I got out of high school, I never, ever even mentioned it to any college interviewers or anything. I just said, I'm going to be an engineer. I'm going to build radios and televisions. I like things that have knobs, where you turn something and something happens. That's interaction. I always like the interaction you can get with electronic devices. It's almost like I was kind of a nerd, and I was out of things socially and left out by all the other people and kind of very alone. And these little machines were my best friend. Well, my first year of college, computer science, introduction to computers, graduate course in that year. Graduate. I was a freshman, and I was involved in engineering, so I was allowed to take it. Got my A+, wrote every program I could think of to write to calculate tables of numbers, and I ran our class 5 times over budget. I didn't know they had a budget. I didn't know about such things. It was very scary how much money that equated to. So I wasn't going to try to go back there the second year. Second year of college, I had a friend who copied the key to the computer room. He worked there. He made a copy. We went in at midnight. We'd open up the door. He'd turn on the pieces of the computer. I'd write the programs on punch cards, feed them in, correct them, feed them in again, write more programs. And we'd do this lots of nights. If a computer was sitting there unused in the middle of the night, I felt it should be used. Somebody should be using it. It's like Gomer Pyle. You got to get in your home. This is your home to the golf ball, he says. Well, but I just wanted to write every program I could think of doing and new things, and that was my form of learning. It wasn't classes. It wasn't like I got a grade for it even. I took a couple computer courses I got grades for, but I took a whole bunch that didn't even give me transfer credit. I grew up very, very high ethics from my dad. I'm much more proud of my values than I am of my engineering, which was strong. But my third year of college, I didn't want to take a loan. I felt you should pay with money you have. I wish our government thought this way. Look at companies like Apple that save so many billions of dollars in cash. They're running companies the right way, have some savings. So I went to work for a year to earn the money for my third year of college. third year of college was just great. By then, you get your choice of classes. So all I took was graduate hardware and software courses. Got on the dean's list, and that was a wonderful year. But totaled my car that year and decided I'd work and take another year off to earn the money for my fourth year of college. Well, that fourth year of college didn't come back for 10 years because I got a job working for the company with the hottest gadget in the world. Like today's iPhone 4, it was the Hewlett-Packard 35 calculator. And they heard I was a great designer. They interviewed me. They hired me right away as an engineer, designing chips and calculators. And how could you ever get such an incredible job? I didn't have a certification. I didn't have a college degree. I had the ability, and they recognized it. And I wish more companies worked that way, you know, and could sense who's going to come through and be a good designer. At Hewlett-Packard, I loved doing these machines, but since I had little hope in those days of ever having a girlfriend or a wife, I had a lot of time at home at night. So I'd work on calculators at Hewlett-Packard in the day, and I'd go home at night, and I'd work on my own projects. Sometimes to build them up, I'd come back to the lab at Hewlett-Packard, get parts out of the storeroom, and build up my own little projects, and it was so intriguing. I saw the first arcade game, Pong. I had to have one. How do I have one? Well, I understand TV circuits, and I can design digital things to put pulses out any time I want for our television signals, and I designed a Pong game, built it. A little tiny little thing with 28 $1 chips, took it into work and showed my engineers, and when you missed the ball, it printed a 4-letter word like heck. And then Steve Jobs came back from Oregon, where I'd taken him to college. He was a very free spirit. The counterculture movement was going on, and I admired these people that thought differently. And the words that they said, it was hard to contradict them on the way they were saying life should be led. But I didn't want to be one of them. I'm going to be a middle level, middle America, a middle class, feet on the ground, engineer with a home and a family someday. Steve Jobs was more like a real hippie and going out and being experimental. And he went off to college, and they gave him a set of courses, and he showed it to me. And he said, I'm supposed to take English Lit and this other thing and calculus. And I said, yeah, that's what you take your first year of college. He says, no, I thought you went to college. I just want to learn about Shakespeare. I want to study, calligraphy, and I want to study quantum physics and stuff that there is in college. And he didn't go to a single class that first week. He stayed in his little tent in his dorm room with his girlfriend, and I was so scared I could never do that. Well, he came back and saw my Pong game. He took my Pong game down and showed it to Atari, the company that started arcade games way back then. They were in Los Gatos, California, where I live now. And they liked it. He impressed us. He's so fast thinking and all over the map. That's what I like about him. I like people, most of my friends had ADHD, and I never did. I was always real calm. But he's all over the map with his ideas everywhere, and they hired him. But then he doesn't get along with people that well on the day shift, so they put him on the night shift all alone. So there's one there. And he came to me once and he said, they need this game. Well, one-player Pong game, started describing it to me, and I said, I would love to design a game that kids are actually going to play in a bowling alley. I would love to be the designer of one of those. And he said, there's a hitch, you have to do it in 4 days. When games were hardware, this was a half a man-year project, at least. And I was a hot designer. I said, I don't think I can do it, but I'll try. Steve needed the money in 4 days, I guess. So we went in, no sleep, 4 days, got mononucleosis, both of us, sleeping sickness, and we delivered a working breakout game. Designed the first breakout game. So proud of that. And the next thing I saw somebody typing on a teletype. A friend was down in a basement in Cupertino. Steve and I went over, and he's typing on a teletype. And teletype back then cost more than a car, so a person wouldn't really own it. But he's typing, so I'm playing chess with a computer in Boston. And whoa, and he brings up a list of universities, and I believe that Michigan State was one of them, the early ARPANET days. The ARPANET, which was the inspiration of today's internet. Michigan, Stanford, Berkeley, UCLA, MIT, those kind of colleges. You could log on, and they'd log in as a guest, and then you could see files and run programs that were available to guests. I had to have this, just like a Pong game. Well, I figured out how to put balls and paddles on my TV at home. Now, this was a true open source era. The television set had no video in. You had to unscrew the back of it, take it apart. It came with a schematic of the circuit. You take your oscilloscope and probe and find where the video signals were, and then you could run a wire in and condition the signal right, and get your signal right into your own TV. Free output device, the only free input-output device in the world that's free because you already owned a TV. Well, now I thought I'll get a keyboard. I found a keyboard for 60 bucks. That's like hundreds of today's dollars. Expensive. A keyboard. It didn't even have lowercase. but I could now type on it. I could type on the keyboard. We built a little circuit, you know, that could now put characters on my TV set instead of paddles and balls. And I would type, and my signals would go into a modem I built, into a phone connection to Stanford, onto the ARPANET. And I could type to these computers in Boston, and they could type back to my TV. And wow, that was incredible. I had it. I didn't have much use for it, but I just wanted to have built it and know that I could. It's like when you reach out to a faraway place in those days, it's like you're Superman. Nowadays, the internet gives us the whole world easy. It's hard to imagine, but this was Superman stuff. Nobody ever heard of it. And a club got formed, and they were talking about microprocessors, a cheap little computer on a chip that was going to make computers affordable. And I didn't know anything about microprocessors. I was so embarrassed. I went to the first meeting of this club called the Homebrew Computer Club because I built a terminal, and I was going to pass out my designs and show people, here's how you can build a terminal with about $41 chips. Very inexpensive, very carefully designed, optimized to send characters over a modem to a computer in Boston. Of course, modems only went 30 characters a second, so I optimized my design to only put 60 characters a second on the screen of my TV, but that was to make it optimal. Anyway, I went to this club and I learned about microprocessors. I said, I don't know anything about this, but they passed out a data sheet. I studied it that night. I said, oh my God, these microprocessors are like the computers I used to design in high school. I'm in business now. I had told my dad I was going to give up owning a house so that I could buy a computer someday, a 4K computer that I could run my own programs on. 4K bytes is what you needed to run a program. And now I saw the whole formula. I was there. I just take my little terminal that can call a computer in Boston, put the microprocessor, which is a little computer, onto it, and put some memory there. You need some RAM. 4K dynamic RAMs that just came out. The first time ever in history that RAM was less expensive than magnetic core memories. And beautiful, went right on the little board, and I built this computer up. I said, look at our calculators at Hewlett-Packard. It's like a little computer. It was actually a little 1-bit processor, because we couldn't get very many transistors on a chip. 1 bit cycling 56-bit numbers through, and you turned it on, and it ran a little program in ROM. Turn it on, the calculator's running a program. And then you press the 5 button, it's saying, what key is being pressed? What key is being pressed? You press the 5 key, and it says the 5 key got pressed. Put a 5 in the display, you go back. What key is being pressed? You press the 6. Put the 6 in the display. I said, I'll write a little program that just turns on and says, what is being typed on the keyboard? And I won't have to have this big, huge front panel with switches and lights and putting 1s and 0s into memory bits by pushing another button. I'll skip that. I'll just type stuff in. And it was a great idea. The 256-byte program I wrote to do it. 256 bytes took 2 COM chips. 2 COM chips, programmable ROMs. That's how few bits we got on a chip back then. 2 of them to be 256 bytes. And I had my little program, and now I could type stuff in and get rid of it. Oh, I made all the Xerox copies I could of my design and my software. I took it down to the club, passed it out for free. Because these were the people that wanted to change education, change communication, change the way we live our lives, and make the programmer more important than the CEO of a company. Give us our own little machines to solve all the company problems right on our own desk. I felt so good about empowering all these people that wanted to be part of the revolution. Steve Jobs came back from college. He saw the interest. He said, well, all these people want to build it, but it's too hard. It's too long a job. Let's make a PC board for 20 bucks and sell it for 40. And I didn't know if we'd ever get our money back. We'd have to put a few $100 each in. And he says, well, but for once, we'll have a company of our own. You know, best friends having their own company. Who could ever turn that down? As long as you aren't under the gun, somebody says you have to make a profit, then it's easy to do a lot of things, you know? I didn't have to leave Hewlett-Packard. I'm an engineer for life. I wasn't going to go up the management ladder. I liked designing circuits. I knew I was successful at that. And if I went up the management ladder, I would be wiped out, and I'm just not a strong fighter, and I don't like telling people they're wrong and firing them and things like that. So I was going to be an engineer at Hewlett-Packard for life. I told Steve, well, I can't start this company unless Hewlett-Packard approves. I'll be doing it on the side. They wouldn't like that. So I went to Hewlett-Packard. I beseeched them to build a little $800 computer you could type your own programs in. And all the managers met, and they turned me down for the first time out of 5. Turned me down 5 total times as times went on. And so Steve and I were in business. Built a little machine with those chips. I told you how we did it in the garage, and with no money at all. I sold the most valuable thing I owned to start the company. And that was my Hewlett-Packard calculator. That was it. And Steve sold the only thing he had to sell. We each got a few $100s and put the company together. Now, the Apple I only sold about 100 things. Built up a little bank account, you know, $10,000, nothing huge. But we were getting known, we were so proud of ourselves, and I still had my job at Hewlett Packard. Then I developed in 3 months, I said, I'm going to sit down and design a computer from scratch. I'm not going to modify a little machine that was to talk over phone lines at slow speed into an Apple I computer. I'm going to design one from scratch, and I had a weird color idea. Where did the color idea come from? Nobody ever thought color was going to come to computers. Color television in those days was very complicated. A color generation boards would cost $1,000 and have all these, you know, differential equation, sine wave, phase delay, mixtures, you know, and controls. Very difficult, analog stuff. And I had this idea, while I was down at Atari doing Breakout, not sleeping for 4 days and nights, my mind was always floating. It's half awake, half asleep. Your mind can get very creative, go different places. And I'm out on the factory floor, and I'm so tired, I don't even know what's happening. They had only black and white TVs on the early arcade games at Atari. One TV had a light going back and forth, a dot, back and forth, changing color, like a rainbow, like a psychedelic show at, you know, at a concert. And I had just blue, green, yellow, red Mylar on a black and white TV, but I couldn't figure that out. Oh my God, this color is so beautiful. And then I went back into the lab where Steve was wire wrapping my design, and I just sort of drifted off thinking color, and I thought about color television signals, what I had learned in high school. And then I thought about, what if you have ones and zeros going up and down at the right rate? Will that show up as on TV as color? Whoa, and what if you put bits into a little shift register and shift them around and around and around, and they repeat this up-down pattern. And depending upon the 4 bits you put in, you might have 16 different colors. Filed that idea away. Well, when I built the Apple II, I could type a number into memory, and a blue square would pop up on my TV. Type a number into memory, and a yellow square would pop up. This was the first time ever in history for a low-cost computer. I called Steve Jobs over, and we knew we had, you know, the big winner that was really going to start the revolution and make computers nice to the home. I put game paddles into this thing. I put graphics in for games. I put pixels in so you could have high-resolution definitions of little things like rocket ships and all that. So much for the fun and the entertainment and the games was built into that machine that I really want to look back and say that I had an impact in accelerating computers being fun. And how are people going to accept computers into the home? Steve Jobs and our funder, we had a funder. He put up the money, up big money, to start the company. I had to decide to leave Hewlett Packard. Very difficult. But Mike Marco put up the money. He had marketing experience. He'd made his money at Intel. He wanted to come out, you know, he was going to run our marketing. He owned as much of Apple as Steve Jobs and me. So there was a third. He was older, he was experienced. He told us what kinds of people to hire, what their job responsibilities were, how to organize the company. He was the mentor that really made Apple successful. But you never hear about him because he was just low-key. He wasn't rags to riches coming from nothing. And he funded us, and my job was just pure engineering. I would not consider running a company. Steve Jobs' role was to learn how to run every single department in a company, to become a master executive at every level. And so it's amazing how things worked out like that. I had designed all the hardware, all the software, I've done all the technician work, all the testing, I've written a basic language myself without ever having taken a course in such a thing. But you know what? When you've got to do something for your own heart, you figure out how to do it and you write the book yourself. You don't need a book. So anyway, we got that product into off, and after a year and a couple of hit things, mainly a killer app, the first spreadsheet, the Apple II took over the world, made Apple a big company. I'm ready for questions now. That's all. That's my introductory remarks, because they apply more to young people who are thinking about, maybe someday I'll be in a startup, maybe I'll have ideas, maybe I'm going to turn them into reality. So I've been through that part of it. Any questions? Yeah.
At Hewlett Packard, you worked on calculators. Do you remember which models and what your significant contributions were to those?
Yes, at Hewlett Packard, I worked on calculators, starting with the HP 45, right after the 35. I worked on the 45, the 55, the 65, the 67. My 65 is the one I actually sold. We had other projects going on that developed an LED watch. What I generally did at first was I looked at chip designs, and we wanted to add a few more instructions to our internal processor. So I basically worked out the logic to add a few instructions to that chip. Then I got involved. We were going to do a very high-speed processor, a system that I sat down and designed a lot of the architecture of, because I was the key architect. And then also we were going to make our own chips, have an advantage. We were going to lay out and build our own chips. Every Hewlett Packard division back in those days had its own chip factory right in the division, and the divisions were spread out all over the country. but we had one that was CMOS, and we looked into doing silicon on sapphire, and I would actually do tape-ups of my own to make test cells. And so I learned quite a bit about chip design, layout, testing, simulation, and all that. And that still carries with me quite a bit. So I hope that answered your question, but I didn't write software for the calculators, but I studied it. All of our algorithms for these first calculators that had numbers like sines and cosines, you think it's all floating point. All of the arithmetic internally was done with quartic algorithms using integers. Not just for the speed, but really for the precision. When you had a quartic algorithm, it gave you a precise answer instead of things like Taylor series and all that. So I really became influenced that integers were the heart of my life, which is why I made my integer for the Apple II. And I made my basic in integers.
What kind of relationship did you or do you have with Ronald Wayne?
Relationship that I had or do have with Ron Wayne. When we started Apple I with the Apple I's, Steve and I got permission from Hewlett Packard, and we met one night. Steve said, "There's a third person I want you to meet." We went over to Ron Wayne's apartment. And he'd been around in the businesses, he'd been screwed by a lot of businesses, screwed on stock deals, but he knew the business, he knew how things go. He impressed me. He was a super conservative who had read every ultra conservative book in the world, but I was just a young, naive guy, and it sounded like he had answers to everything. And so Steve proposed that Steve have 45% of Apple, I have 45%, and Ron Wayne have 10%, so he could resolve any disputes. And Ron sat down with a typewriter and typed up the entire, it was just a partnership agreement, typed it up with all the legal phrasing and words and everything. He wasn't a lawyer, but he was so talented in every area. He drew a sketch of Newton under the apple tree that we put on our first Apple I manual. He wrote the manual, and then here's what happened. We were originally just going to make PC boards for 20 bucks and sell them for 40. Then Steve got an order for $50,000. Scary, twice my salary at Hewlett Packard, for fully stocked boards with all the parts soldered on, all the chips and all the extra parts and power supply parts. And what happened was we would get the parts on 30 days credit, as I explained, build up the computers in 10 days and get paid cash. Well, Ron realized that if we ever didn't get paid, Steve Jobs had no money. Steve Wozniak had no money. And he had these gold nuggets under his mattress or something. And he's the one that would wind up. He was taking the financial risk, and he didn't have that much of the company, so he sold out for a few $100s, his 10% of Apple. But that was later on, though, we formed a real corporation, and it was sort of a different legal process, and that was where our funder had, basically a third of the company, and Steve a third, and I a third. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I have two questions. First question is, can I take a picture or video after the speech?
Afterwards, I might have to run off to something where I'm getting an honorary degree. Otherwise, I would say, sure, I'll stick around.
Okay.
Well, I have some time limits today, too.
Okay. Okay, my second question is...
It has to do with tickets to a Red Wings game. Yeah.
My second question is like, is it doing some evil things unnecessary for successful company and people? Is like the reason for me to ask is rumors that like Apple kind of like stole the idea of graphic interface and the mouse from the Janus, and Microsoft stole the idea from you guys, and like the Zuckerberg stole the idea of Facebook from somebody else, and also like when you started learning computer, you didn't really have the access to the computer, so you kind of like broke into some computer room kind of illegally. I mean,
well, I just described how I did it in college.
Okay.
That's what you mean.
So that's my question. So is it necessary? Like sometimes people have limited resources. I mean.
Well, let me go back to the graphical user interface.
Okay.
We had a guy come to Apple right in the garage and talk to Steve and I, Jeff Raskin. He had taught classical music at UC San Diego. He was brilliant. He knew all these languages of the world, and he also knew technology. And he explained to us that you can make two computers with two sets of chips, and they can just calculate the same amount just as fast. They're going to be equal computers. And a computer scientist knows how to set them up and twiddle buttons and put ones and zeros into memory and get the output. But he said if you put a lot of work in and you design software, you can make it turn on in a way that it's intuitive for a young child or a spouse that's never used a computer in her life or his life to come up and be able to use this machine. And he taught us, you got to make these machines easy to use for people. And he took us to Xerox PARC Center, where we saw, I was in the group that went, and we saw the mouse, and we saw windows pop up on a screen. It wasn't quite as complete as today's GUI is, but as soon as I saw it, I said, oh my God, once you have this machine, it's so incredibly powerful that you never go back through it's a one-way door. Well, we saw it at Xerox PARC Center, but it had been described in a paper by Daniel Ellsberg. It's a paper by, I'll think of his name. I should remember because he's a friend. But he wrote a paper in 1963 called Douglas Engelbart, Augmenting Human Intelligence. And it was how can we design computer equipment to solve the great problems of the world. And he came up with the whole idea of hyperlinks and a mouse and partly a GUI. And he could operate over networks over a long distance with two different people accessing the same screen. So he wrote that paper in '63. And we're talking 1980 now. In the meantime, he had shown complete demos that are on the web that you can see operating his approach. So the ideas of mouses and mouse-operated systems and graphical user interfaces had been done. Xerox PARC had these brilliant, almost academics and teachers working there that were given a freedom of development by a super management style that has won a lot of awards for management. And they were allowed, if they saw a better way to do something, they would instantly give up what they had worked on and go the other way. They were that pure. And they had some incredibly good stuff. Some parts of it, like a language they had called Smalltalk, weren't quite applicable to a reasonable speed computer. But Steve Jobs looked at it, he said, look, we took big, huge computers, and Wozniak shrunk them and made them affordable. So that's what we're good at. We can take this machine that you're selling for $50,000 and we can make it at prices people can afford. And we brought it into our company, we built that computer, it was the Lisa. And it cost $10,000, which is $20,000 today. Too much for a personal computer. It cost $20,000 because $10,000 of it was for the RAM. It needed a megabyte of RAM. To do a GUI machine, the minimum GUI machine, right, needed a megabyte of RAM. But then Steve Jobs, he would walk into meetings in the Lisa building, and he would just tell people, walk in and say, you guys are just full of shit, and walk out. They wouldn't know what to do, so they kicked him out of the building. He wasn't allowed in the Lisa building. So he went over to our Macintosh group where I worked. Jeff Raskin, that brilliant human person that wanted to bring humanism into computers and bring all these things where they work well with people, was developing the system called Macintosh. And Jeff kind of had some weird ideas that came out later in some other computers, but too weird. Steve wanted to build just a cheap Lisa to compete with the Lisa that had kicked him out. So he kind of took over the program and started, incorporating all the bits to make things a little smaller, a little less costly, and the main cost was RAM, how to get the RAM down. Skip memory protection, skip all sorts of things that cost extra memory, but they were right. Every time the Macintosh over years added something that got closer to the Lisa, we said, oh, it's a better Macintosh. So it was really too much skimpy, and it still came out so expensive that we lost a huge market share to the very, very cheap PCs. By comparison, we lost the market share over many years. We could have competed with the PCs maybe with a different product, like the Apple II, and maybe kept a higher market share and brought the Mac out when it was cheap enough to make. The Mac wasn't really affordable at first, and it had a lot of problems. Anyway, the GUI, did we steal it? No. We sat down and invented it so well ourselves. As a matter of fact, we took a closed room. Our idea was that somebody who knew nothing about computers should be able to use this product. And with the Lisa, computer, we took closed rooms with double-sided mirrors. We could watch them. They didn't know we were watching. And we'd bring somebody in and say, here's a piece of gear, just some kind of open chassis with some parts on it, and a mouse and a screen. We'd say, just sit down and see what you can figure out you can do with it. And we'd leave the room. Nobody around. After a while, they discover if you move this little thing, a cursor's on the screen that moves. And then they'd see pictures, little icons, pictures of paintbrushes. And they'd click on it and see that the cursor changed shape to a paintbrush. And they would figure out, we changed and changed how many menus, what the words were, where they were positioned, the size of things, what the icons looked like. We worked and changed to make it so somebody would walk in and in a shorter amount of time figure out how to use a computer with no manual at all. That was incredible development. Microsoft, on the other hand, might have been doing the same sort of things. I don't know that they saw it from us. The trouble is the Macintosh died right away, really dead in sales. And we had to get something going in business that could afford it. So we got Microsoft, we paid them to write Excel, the spreadsheet, for the Macintosh first, before PCs. So we had a spreadsheet, we had something we could sell it to business on, and we had to license away parts of the GUI then. Judges later determined that we had licensed everything we've done for every version of operating system, not just the one we thought we had. The 3 words were in there, and subsequent works or something like that. So it was a lot of legal stuff, but it didn't amount to anything. I don't know. I hope that one answer is good enough. I can't remember your other questions. Right here in front.
Yeah, I was just wondering, what are your views on Apple today? And
My views on Apple today?
yeah, where are they
Same as about everybody. Best products in the world. They're closed, and as a computer scientist, I wish it was open so I could, modify and write my own programs in any language I felt like. I don't think that would hurt Apple and make the system bad and not work well together. But the reason I say it's the best products in the world is I use them all. I try to buy every gadget, every type of smartphone I can and compare. And I know that a BlackBerry can do all the things that an iPhone does because I've had one and I've used it. And I've watched a lot of other people use them and they're very efficient at it in time. But I have to keep remembering steps and it's never pretty and beautiful. And on the iPhone, it's just always easy to follow and I feel like somehow this is just one I would want to own. It's just more precious. It's something you'd show to other people if it was clothing you were wearing. I don't know if that'll always be the case, but right now I have more trouble on the Android phones, except for voice. I like to talk to my phones. I was a computer scientist where everything is structure. I don't like going in, tapping buttons and going all over the place and following instructions to get things done on my computer. If I can just speak a message, email Janet, I'm on stage right now, period. And it sends an email. Or I can say, navigate to MSU, and it starts navigating. The Android will do that. They built voice into the operating system, and Apple are still waiting. Apple, I can go, I'd like reservation to Ruth Chris for 8 people at 4 p.m., and it's done. So I like just talking and not having, because I don't have to worry about spelling errors. I don't have to worry about what, even being in a certain application to do it. I just want to speak, press a button and speak it. So I'm hoping that my iPod Watch someday I can just very quickly speak a lot of questions. What are the 5 largest lakes in Michigan? And get the answer that easy. So I'm hoping for that day when radio's built in.
What are your thoughts on DRM and the DCMA and things like that, and its impact on modern teachers, tinkerers, and hackers and such?
My thoughts on DRM and DCMA, and its effect on hackers. Well,
hackers, tinkerers, teachers.
Well, hackers are basically where I came from in life, trying to explore systems to figure out how they work. Download code, not destroy stuff, not a bad hacker that wants to hurt people and destroy things. On the other hand, I have a lot of friends who are designers of stuff. That's a creative art. I have a lot of friends who are musicians. And they don't like when they create something, if they give it away and say, I'll give it away as long as you don't copy it, and everybody breaks their word and just copies it for free, it's really hurt them, their revenue sources quite a bit. Even very large, well-known musicians, their royalties have just dropped to nothing because of all this. Well, it has to. I'm sorry. It's a new world, and we're going to transmit songs digitally with little tiny electrons that take nothing to get them from here to there. And we don't have to build big, expensive CDs anymore. So get with it. And the music industry fought it. They should have got with it from the start. Apple had the right idea. Apple has a DRM. Sure, it's not uncrackable, but it's decent enough that an awful lot of people, these people who can afford and have the money and older are honest. I know too many older people with a ton of money that still steal their music. But it's so easy to select the song. Look how easy it is. Select the song. Now it's on my computer, and it's on every one of my iPhones and iPods and whatever else, my iPad. So it's just too easy. And I can gift the song to somebody else. I got all the beautiful options in my mind, and it does go through DRM. And the songs that come aren't even usually protected anymore. So I can just email it to my son if I want it. You got to hear this. I think that's a valid, use. I was careful in my life never to ever download music for free, not pay for it. I was very, very careful because I wanted to be, even though I believed in it, I wanted to be on the good, safe side if I ever speak about it. I only did it twice for 2 songs. One of them, my son had gone off to Boston for a summer program during high school, and I wanted to send him a couple of Boston songs I thought of. Please Come to Boston and MTA. And I couldn't find anywhere on the internet that you could buy them. I want to buy it, So I just sent them to him and bought the CDs at the store later, which was kind of honest. So my thoughts are, well, it's just a new world. You can't really stop what's happening. I think of books. Are books going to all be purloined and gotten for free? Textbooks, you should have every textbook in every college course should be on your iPad. They're resisting. You know, the publishing industry resists it because they've got a sales model right now that doesn't go that way. But I'm thinking someday you'll have all your books that way over from the cloud or whatever. The question I have too is, if we're speaking to our phones, are we going to have letters anymore? 1,000 years from now, are we going to be writing? I don't know. Yeah.
Do you still write code today or design chips or whatever?
Right. Do I still write code today? I do not write in today's programming languages. I didn't have time to keep up with it because I'm too nice a guy and I answer my phone and I answer my email. And life caught up to me at a certain point in time that I couldn't really learn new languages. But I do sit down once in a while, yes, and I have a puzzle or something on my computer I just want to write a script for. So I use Apple script programming languages, and sometimes I use C when I need it fast to really solve a difficult puzzle. It's just one of my favorite things to do in life, games and puzzles. And basically I encourage it. Another thing, when I was a programmer and a hardware, primarily a hardware engineer, but I wrote my software like it was hardware. And the biggest thing that I get in life is not if somebody says, oh my gosh, you brought these great machines into our life. Doesn't mean anything to me compared to the one guy that comes and says, I looked at your circuit. How did you think of designing it that way? I looked at your code. My God, that was incredible how it was configured. That's what means the most to me. But I used my head so tight for a couple decades of my life, thinking out all these little tiny things and getting them so perfect as an artist does. And I knew that you can't put that much energy into your work for your entire life. You do it when you're young. When you're older, you got to find something simple like being a manager. So the type engineer I was didn't fit with it.
I was growing up, you like to speak into your phone. I really like natural languages and how that works with computer programming. So, what do you think about like keyboards and mouses becoming obsolete?
Keyboards and mouses becoming obsolete. Not in the near future. Not in the near future. But I think that for the mobile, we're already on a trend towards mobile, which is already, what is your keyboard and mobile? It's your fingers, Would it go away? It already has gone away for me. I look at what I like to do. And I just found, I remember what the different things my phones can do. And one phone can do one thing, a different phone can do others. But I grab the phone and do it by voice all the time. And I just speak it, and I skip the keyboard a lot. And I also like, on Android, you can always skip the keyboard with voice, or just swiping. Swiping is kind of fun. If you know what that is, where you run your finger over every letter of a word, and prints the word. Yes?
What's your take on software patents and their impact on innovation?
I know a lot of people, especially in the open source type world and then the hacker type world, are very much against software patents. And it's hard for me to say because a lot of software actually is very much like hardware. If hardware is deserving of patents, then software is too. Remember that if you patent something, and your patent really isn't worth a lot, it doesn't save that much money for people, it's not something they have to go with, it's something anybody would have thought of, then that patent really isn't in court later on. You have to make a ton of money before they're going to sue you for a patent violation anyway. So I don't think it really stops. I tell young people, don't worry about patents. Just design what you can design, use parts you can design, build it up yourself, and worry about, patents come along. They're not going to come along unless you're rich. So, some patents though are very valuable, and we had a couple of valuable ones in our Apple days for sure. And I'm close to the patent department. I think it's still a good thing that we have to have. It's in our Constitution. And James Madison made sure we had patents.
I know this is a little cliche. All the things you've done for in engineering is being great. And what are you most
Oh, what am I most proud of in my life? I will answer that now with the Apple II computer because it was an incredible engineering feat and design and clever ideas nobody could have ever thought were possible. But I used to answer it, I was proudest of my Dial-A-Joke, the company I ran all by myself. The first Dial-A-Joke machine ever in the San Francisco Bay Area. How could I have been the first? Other people like humor. Dial a number and you get a joke. You need an answering machine. Back in that year, you guys aren't old enough. Back in that year, it was illegal in the United States to own, use, or purchase your own answering machine or telephone. Illegal. There was one monopoly company, AT&T, You had no choice except to lease from them, where they still own it, one model of phone, one model of answering machine that was very expensive. You know, entrepreneurs couldn't design their own cheaper systems. It was so expensive, it was half my apartment rental. For a young engineer, that's a lot of money. And it was so expensive that nobody else had done it. I was the first. And I told short little jokes every day, and they were Polish jokes. So I got 2,000 calls a day. I think I was the most called single line number in the United States. I told Polish jokes, and the Polish people, Polish American Congress Incorporated, accused me of maligning people of Polish descent. My name is Wozniak. So I thought humor's the best medicine, laughter's the best medicine. Something I said this afternoon. And so I went on my dial joke machine. I left a joke for the next day. I said, "Hello, thank you for dialing dial joke. The Polish people are trying to turn us off for telling they don't like our jokes about Polish people. Go tell them what they're full of." And I figured all these kids are going to call. I gave the number of the president. They're all going to call and say, "We like the humor. The jokes are funny." And the next letter accused me of malicious, obscene phone calls. So I said, "What if I change them to Italian jokes?" And they said, "That's fine." This was a different era. Just different standards, different culture, no PC, yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk a bit about your work at Fusion.io and your involvement there and what you're doing right now.
My work at Fusion.io, what I'm doing right now. Well, Fusion.io is an incredible company with an incredible product, but I'm not really on a design team. Like a lot of people, every day I get tons and tons of email from people. "You got to hear my new idea. It's $1 billion idea. You've got to meet with me." And I get requests for 5 days of my time every day of the year. No brainer. Doesn't work. Well, once in a while they get through, and I have a lunch to hear about their project. So this company had written me about their some boards to replace hard disks with solid-state disks. Great. I'm a big believer in that. I was an electrical engineer, not a mechanical, so I tried replacing hard disks way back in time, back in the early 90s, and I would buy these hugely expensive 500, I forget if it was kilobytes or megabytes, RAM disks that plugged into a SCSI bus. And God, it made my computers fast, and I've been a real believer in RAM disks. So I went and met these people, and whoa, they had a different approach. Rather than building a RAM disk, they put the fast RAM chips, the solid-state, the NAND flash chips that were now inexpensive thanks to iPods. They put them on a board that plugged right into the server. I thought, my God, that's the way I did my floppy disk. I plugged it right in, right next to the processor. The shortest path, the fewest parts, the fastest operation. I started asking them questions, and I asked how it would compare to like RAID arrays of Intel solid-state disks and running Microsoft Express software. They came back and they said, Exchange software, and they came back and said, "Oh my God, we beat them 8-1 in this benchmark. We beat them 20-1. Every single question I asked had the right answers. I admired that company so much for having, they could have taken easy venture money to make a solid-state disk that just plugs in where a disk goes, and it's made out of solid-state chips. But because they thought out plugging it into the server, they really had done what I used to do when I designed. So I went home and told my assistant, "This company is going places. Our entire life now is done on the computer. It comes off the internet. Every big company has like 100,000 servers out there sending us data. These are huge, huge, huge unseen market because it's not consumer. It's enterprise. And this company's going places." Well, they had a big financing round. I didn't have anything to do with it. They came back and met me in my hometown at lunch, and I thought they were going to ask me to be on their advisory board. An advisory board is something if you have a big name, you get invited to be on it, and it's just sort of, you don't really have to do something, meet once a year and just toss over what comes into your mind. And it doesn't pay you any money, but it's just for the company to have your name. At the end of the lunch, they asked me if I would join the company. And I've never been asked that since Hewlett-Packard. So I said, yes, this is a great company. This company's going places. So it's kind of like, I give them a lot of attention. They started getting the early first sales, and they're the leader in the world in this field. Probably 1/10 of the internet data is coming off of our boards instead of hard disks. Any of you use Facebook or, Apple Mobile or things like that. I mean, we're in a lot of places. So it's not known, but the company's just going great. And I've had a lot of great ideas, technical ideas, but usually about 1 to 2 weeks after the engineers in Salt Lake City came up with it. And I've got some more great ideas, so I'm always thinking about it. And it's kind of nice to be replacing. What happens is if you have the big servers that are, you talk to a company that has 100,000 servers, big HP server or an IBM server, and the processor is only about 10% utilized because it's just waiting for I/O. It's waiting, waiting, waiting. Send out a lot of requests to disk drives, and you're waiting for the disk to get their little head in place. You're waiting for the data to come. And when you plug our board in, it's so fast. One board, 100 megabytes per second, or gigabyte per second, reading and writing continually. And all of a sudden, the processor goes up to 100%. You can get rid of 9 servers. And you save all the power that they use. You save all the space that they used in the data center. And that's really incredible savings. That's in the data center, it's green. I don't claim that anything's green for the world, but it's green in the data center.
What's your relationship with Steve Jobs?
My relationship with Steve Jobs has always been friendly. We were best friends leading up to Apple. At the time Apple got going, his role was more in the business end and mine was engineering. So we stopped seeing each other that much except staff meetings. And we became different people more or less. I was really into it to develop technology. And he wanted to become the most important person in the world. He talked about that back in high school. He wanted to become one of those few Shakespeare, Newton types, you know. And that's what was in it. And so we drift apart. We're not close friends now, but we talk peacefully on the phone. We've never had an argument or a fight. We've always been very cordial with each other. Places where he's often rude with other people, he's always very respectful to me. And and I like him and admire him quite a bit. You know, and I think it's much more important that the person at the top understands the technology, even though he never was a designer. He understood what technologies were good and what were bad, but more than that, he understands people, what they really want, what really works well for a person, what's good that way, and that's much more important than the engineering. It's the marketing side of it, really. So, he and I were a great combination because I had the best engineering at the time, and he spotted it. And I didn't want to start a company, I just wanted to design things and give them away, and he always wanted to. The Apple II computer was the 6th time that he found one of my inventions, and he found a way to sell it. 6th time. Yeah, it wasn't the first.
What has been one of your biggest hurdles in your life?
One of the biggest hurdles in my life, well, I've been married 4 times. I didn't the right one. So I guess it's lucky. Yeah, I guess they were not hurdles, they were slides. Biggest hurdles? Well, a couple of projects at Apple. When I had to develop a floppy disk drive, if I got it done in 2 weeks, I get to go to Las Vegas. And I was too afraid to raise my hand and say, I want to go to Las Vegas with Apple. Only 3 marketing guys were going. So I said, if we have a floppy disk, can I go? And they said, yeah. I'd never even thought about doing a floppy disk. I'd never worked with a disk drive in my life. I'd never worked with a disk operating system in my life. But I'm telling you, when you have to get to Las Vegas, you find the way. I sat down and came up with the most beautiful, elegant design ever. I almost put it ahead of the Apple II and got it done. And what was I going to answer? What's the question? Well, part of that floppy disk design, I figured out, okay, I got to write some little data out. Ones and zeros sort of tiny. They have to be separated by 4 microseconds. If I write them onto the disk, then what comes back is some little signals. I can decode them into 1s and 0s. But how do I know where the start of a track is? The disk spins around and around and around with these 1s and 0s coming. How do I know where the start is? I didn't think I was going to be able to solve it. And I came up with a method that worked. So little marker codes. I guess it's common. I could have read it in a book, but I didn't know. I was doing it all on my own. So I had a couple of things like that, hurdles, but pretty much nothing else. I was real lucky. All my Apple projects were A+ jobs.
It's fairly common to see a picture of you waiting in line for the latest and greatest Apple gadget. Do you actually have to wait in line to get them?
It's common to see me waiting in line for the latest Apple gadget. I do not have to wait in line. As a matter of fact, the first iPhone, I waited in line, but Steve sent me one in the mail anyway. And I could ask for one, and I would get one. And there's a lot of ways to get it with privilege. You just ask a manager to sell you one out the back door, or whatever. If any store, they can do privileges for VIPs. But I don't like to pull strings in the company, outside of the company. And the reason I waited in line was really mostly that, not that I wanted one that day instead of the next day. It was really that it was one of those important events in history you want to be at. And it was like when I was in college and I would wait in line for concert tickets all night long to the Rolling Stones, and so it's just that important. It's like when the FCC had its ruling on net neutrality. Just about that morning, the day before, I just got in my head, I've got to fly out there and be there, present, in the audience. It's just too important an event, for the world right now. So I do it mostly just for that reason. And I yeah. Yeah, I get screwed up every time I buy a new iPhone too. I've got 2 iPhones that have unlimited international data for $64 a month. You can't touch that. You can't even get more than 200 megabytes ever. And every time I get a new iPhone, they steal it away from me after 3 days. So I'm always ready for it now.
Earlier you mentioned something about, like, that paper that talks about augmented human intelligence and stuff. The big thing that people are talking about is like convergence of humans and technology and our like increased dependence upon our devices and stuff. And an episode of South Park last week kind of talked about it. Where do you stand on this? Is it the fact that I can't walk anywhere without my iPhone a good thing or a bad thing? Or?
Did everyone hear that? Speaking of augmenting human intelligence, there's this idea that we're becoming so dependent on our technology. Sort of, is that one of these negative? Every technology has some positive and negatives to it, depending how you look at it. Well, it's funny. What I say is, every time we invent something new in computers, we're inventing it to do some work for us, to save us from having to do the work. But you're right, it makes us less relevant and less needed. And the cyborgs, the androids, are all. There's this idea that someday there's going to be a war. They have their own thinking in minds, and they decide to take over from the humans. And who's going to win? And my answer is, we lost that 100 years ago. We build all the technology and all mechanics into our life to assist us, but it's so important, critical, we cannot cut it off. We could not possibly live. Everything we've got in our lives and honest really comes from a lot of mechanics, computers controlling things, energy, factories, the way we've increased the amount of energy per person in the world by 1,000 times just because of computers. So basically, the computers can't have their own feelings yet. They can't have their own motivations. We're not at that point. But could they have a brain? Well, we talk about artificial intelligence. Who knows anything about the brain? We don't know the circuit for the brain. We don't even know that your memories are stored in your brain. We hypothesize it. We've got some good reasons for thinking they're up there, because some of the processing steps we can prove are up there. But we don't know they're there. Matter of fact, you lose your teeth and your childhood memories between 6 and 10. The memories in your teeth. It's an absurd. It's absurd. It's absurd. But that's stronger real evidence than anything they propose about real memories in the brain. So we don't know how the brain's wired. How are we going to replace it? Well, you used to ask a person who had a brain a tough question, right? Now who do you ask? It starts with G-O. Did I hear God? Google. So, did we design the internet to be a brain? No. We designed the internet just to pass messages from people to people at other ends of computers. And then computers could talk to each other. And then we had people could publish their own information, and then we had search engines to find it. And all of a sudden, that's a lot of what we used to call a brain. It came out by accident. We didn't plan to find it. Are we going to find an awareness in the internet? And the internet has about as many nodes as we have neurons in the brain, order of magnitude. About as many network connections as we have synapses. So is it going to turn out to somehow get a motive of its own? Could we turn off the internet and survive? How long could we go? How could we get our work done? Any of it. How could you do any of your schoolwork or anything? So we're already at the point we can fire people, but we can't fire the machines. And I saw another hand back that way, I thought. Yeah. What did you say? No, I'm not really a businessman. I don't talk about it in that way. I just see that there's an awful lot of a market for especially young people who've never done anything. They don't have to have a company and the resources of a company to actually come up with a product that can be sold, maybe for free for now. Maybe not everyone is that good, but if you have a brain, you can always think of another one. Young people, small people, little people with no money at all have a real major thing that they can, a way they can crack in with, apps and steal a lot of thunder and do things like even companies like Apple and Facebook came out of that. You don't have to be a huge company with huge amounts of money anymore. So I'm glad for apps for that reason. I don't have formulas, though, for what business will work and what not to do or suggestions, because it's not my thing. I think we have time for a few more.
What do you think in the future could be so much the future of net neutrality?
The future of net neutrality, I have been quoted as saying the internet should be free. What does freedom mean? Difficult. Does it mean there should be no government interference? There should be no government regulation? Well, I think it should be free for us, the users. We should have unrestricted access to data anywhere else in the world, and the ability to send ours anywhere and receive it from anywhere, and not have restrictions in the way. What does regulation mean? People think government regulation, keep it out. I'm sorry, the government's going to regulate those ISPs that are trying to regulate our internet. You know, they're trying to restrict us and control us and determine what we get. The big cable companies and the big telephone companies, and they need regulation to stop them. Where do our freedoms in this country come from? It comes from regulation, called the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. Congress shall not do certain things that impede on our freedoms. And in the end, everybody wants some kind of, net is not interfered with, but when it happens, they aren't going to see it. And my hunch is it's probably going to be interfered and blocked, and you're only going to have access to the people that have enough money to pay for their stuff to get through to you, and you aren't going to know. You're going to be happy and think the internet has all these great things for us. But it closed off from the original idea of the internet that anybody in the world with no money at all can be a publisher.
Well, first of all, my husband brought something with him that you will probably recognize. This is how he knows each other.
Oh yeah, my favorite apple too.
That's been with us a long time. I'd like to ask you, every time I've read about you, I haven't read very much about your wife and or wives, and I was wondering, his wife was somebody who has an educational startup, developed kind of SpaceX. George Hannah told us he's really high, by the way.
Who?
George Hannah.
Okay.
Hannah SpaceX. Anyway, I just wanted to know what advice you have for balancing family with startups and businesses and everything you do. In the interest of not becoming his...
Startups in the family, when you got a family?
Yeah. I mean, in the interest, I don't want to be the first of four
Oh.
wives, I guess.
Well, oddly enough, I was never able to get a girlfriend or get married, but when I started Dial-A-Joke, I would sometimes come home from work at Hewlett Packard and take live calls, and I actually met a girl and we did get married. At the time Apple started. And then we both got incredibly rich, so she decided to divorce me. There's nothing I can do about it. So she's probably a billionaire now. And, so I don't know, but right now, here's what happened. I've decided after all this time, if you find somebody that has similar values and similar personalities, you're in good shape. And very often the personalities are awry, and that's something that's very hard to deal with. You got to work on that. Because you're going to be working so hard, so many hours. What's important to one person, the other may not see the importance of it all the time. Maybe the one is more the actual entrepreneur, designer, creator, and the other is support. And that could get in trouble, so have the similar values. I lucked out. I went on a geek cruise, and I met a woman, and she was on a geek cruise, and she works for Apple and education, my heart, and so I'm lucky. All the weird things I like to do, she loves them all and goes along with them, and so I lucked out. It just took me a while. Yeah.
You still have the cream soda computer?
The cream soda computer was a computer that in between my second and third years of college, I took a year to work to earn the money for college. And while working, I told one of the executives how I used to design all these computers at home. He said, "Did you ever build one?" I said, "No, I could never afford a chip." He got me the chips for a computer of my own design, built it up with a friend, and we drank cream soda, so we called it the cream soda computer. And he introduced me to Steve Jobs right there. Said, "You got to meet this guy, Steve Jobs. He knows digital electronics, and he goes to our high school, and he does pranks at the high school like you do." So it was a good matchup. And the cream soda computer, I may still have that board somewhere. I save a lot of my old boards, but while I was showing it off to the press, I stepped on a wire on the floor, kind of plugged into the wall, and I shorted out 35 volts to my chips and smoke test they all smoked.
Oh.
But hey, it worked. The computer worked. And that was 5 years. That was 5 years before what was called the Altair hobby computer kit, and the time I built the Apple I computer. 5 years before that, I'd already built that exact equivalent computer to the Altair. So I was well past. You don't ever do the same thing in life. You always move forwards. So I was ready to jump way ahead of where other people were. And once they saw the Apple I on a board, microprocessor and some RAM, and about 30 $1 chips, the formula was out for good. Cat was out of the bag. Everyone knew keyboard, TV, and a few chips does the whole job of a computer. You get programs and everything. One of my favorite programs on the Apple II was I programmed Breakout. I knew I could do it in machine language. Could I do it in my slow basic language, interpreted language? And I wrote Breakout in about half an hour. I played with so many scenarios it would have taken me 10 years. I called Steve Jobs over and I was shaking because I saw that now that games were software, the world was going to be different for games. Well, I put a little command in my Breakout that if you hit Control-Z, the paddle would jiggle a bit, but it would never miss the ball. So you might think you're on the paddle, running the paddle around, and because it jiggles, you can't tell it's not your hand. And so I sat a guy down at the club once, and he sat there for about 10 minutes, won the game, and thought he'd won it. Okay, next.
What is the most difficult time you've ever had debugging one of your designs?
Yeah.
How did you get over that?
Most difficult time debugging one of my designs. I've had quite a few of those ones where you're up all night, going into later hours. You find a bug, and that's not the one. You find another bug, and that's not the one. You think you got it each time, and maybe it goes to another night. But there was one. I was at Apple, and it was the floppy disk controller. I had 10 sectors of data per going around each side. Every 8 bits of data got converted to 4 real bits of ones and zeros. Every eight sections on the disk. I figured out a way to make every 8 of them give me 5 bits, and I would get 16 sectors instead of 10. I had to write the most complicated code that had all these different timing loops based on whether a 1 or a 0 would come in. My microprocessor wasn't powerful enough to just grab the data on the fly. I had to watch it and make decisions and put in extra little no-ops here and there. I would go into work every night after work around 5 p.m. and I would start working out on a piece of paper all my formats, my architecture, my thinking, start writing the code, getting it down into shape, and get close to the end by 2 in the morning and go home. I'd stop at Denny's for a milkshake. And then I'd come back the next day, and at 5 p.m., I couldn't pick up where I was. I had to redo the whole thing kind of from scratch to get it as clean as I could. And the next day, I went for 1 month, every day like that. And Steve Jobs would start and say, where's the 16-sector code? It's coming, it's coming. And so I stayed one night until 6 in the morning to finally get the whole thing done, rather than say it's almost there. And got it done. That was a tough one. What? Okay.
I just have a question. You were talking earlier about the closed model that Apple set up on App Store. What's your opinion on the Mac App Store model, and that yes, it's a closed ecosystem, but you can also bring in your own open app?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by closed ecosystem because it's extremely open.
Well, what I mean by Mac
You can't run it. You cannot sell an app. You cannot sell an app without going through Apple's sales store, the iTunes store. Is that what you mean?
What I mean is on the Mac, where you have.
Oh, Mac.
On iPhone, it's you have to go in. You have to go through. You have to spin your app when you get.
Yeah.
You have to approve. But what's your opinion on what you do with the Mac, and that you can go through the App Store, go through the approval process, or also bring in your own app?
On the Macintosh, you can either bring in your own apps or go through the App Store. And I think it's a good model. I kind of like the App Store for watching your upgrades better than I usually do on the upgrade sites. And I don't mind it, but almost all my apps and my choices still are to just bring it in separately, directly from the manufacturer of the app if I can, and otherwise through one of the update sites. But once in a while, I can only have a choice to get it through the App Store, and I do. It's not my first choice yet, but I don't mind it. I haven't had any positive or negative feelings that way. So you're probably getting at some aspect going around, some talk that I don't really not in on. If there's some people disagree with the App Store or something.
No, I didn't know you mentioned that it worked like that in those models.
Oh, I was on the iPhone. On the iPhone, I think it could be an open model, and still Apple could provide all the benefits it provides, working just fine, sell just as much stuff, and not have a big